Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. CMC connects people and ideas through community conversations at forums just like this one nearly every week. I'm Doug Buchanan, Editor-in-Chief of Columbus Business First. I'm also proud to serve on CMC's Board of Trustees and as Chair of the Program Committee. For those of you joining us by live stream, we're coming to you from the Ellis in Columbus's historic Italian Village. Welcome, everyone. If you scan the QR codes at your table, you can learn more about today's forum, take a short survey, and see the many organizations that support your not-for-profit Columbus Metropolitan Club. Speaking of supporters, we are so grateful to today's sponsor, Advanced Drainage Systems, and today's forum partners, Aspire and the Central Ohio Workforce Development Network. Let's have a hand for those three. Thank you as well to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch, and to the Ellis for hosting us. Every CMC forum takes a village, and we want to thank everyone for supporting today's program. One more round of applause for our forum partners. Okay, welcome to today's forum. Belonging is redefining the modern workplace. Leading employers know from experience that cultivating a strong sense of belonging among employees can boost recruitment, retention, and productivity, even with remote workers. With today's panel of passionate leaders, we'll explore the meaning and value of creating a culture of belonging in the workplace and how it's helping key Central Ohio employees and employers to stay at the top of their games. It's now my great honor to welcome our distinguished panelists. First, Daniel Juday, founder and facilitator with Space Creator. Yeah, we'll go ahead and give them each one. Dr. Tina Pierce, Chief of Strategy and Belonging at The Ohio State University Alumni Association. Jennifer Robinson, Chief Human Resources Officer and Deputy Director with the Ohio Department of Veteran Services. And our host, the legendary Margaret Finley, Head of DEI and Corporate Affairs for Advanced Drainage Systems and President of the Board of Directors of the Central Ohio Diversity Consortium. Margaret, the podium is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here for one of my favorite conversations. And before we get into the conversation, I have a question for you all, if you're willing to raise your hand and answer it. Could you say today, wherever you are, whether it's at a job or whatever you're doing in your respective life, that you feel like you belong there? I see the majority of hands, but some people don't feel like they belong there. By the conclusion of this conversation, hopefully you will get some insights on how to make your respective place a place where you feel like you belong. So with that said, we'll get right into the conversation. And belonging, I believe, is a concept that practitioners that we are very passionate about, right, in the workplace. And one of the things that I am most proud of is to finally be at a company I've been at now almost 4 years where I feel like I can bring my whole authentic self to work, right? So I'm no longer code switching. And for those that don't know what code switching is, it's when you're working in an environment and you can't be your authentic self, right? So with that said, the first question is going to go to Daniel. And Daniel, as founder of Space Creator, could you talk to us a little bit about some of the work that you do making people feel like they belong, safe, and respected in the workplace?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Margaret.
You're welcome.
Happy to be here. Thank you for including me in this conversation. I want to throw a caveat before I get started. I I think belonging is something that is maybe more than any other of the words in the DEIB, add extra letters if you want, acronym, that is experiential, right? Diversity is a statistic or a representation or a number, and inclusion's a strategy, and equity's an outcome. And we often talk about belonging as the experience somebody is having. That's the response that they do or don't have to the space that we're creating for them, with them, and around them. And so when we talk about belonging, because we're so self-referential, of course, we're thinking about it through the lens of what has it meant for me or looked like for me to belong. So I know that as a straight white male in Midwest America, the spaces I typically intend to navigate were designed with a person like me in mind. So just as a caveat, as we talk about belonging, I invite you to complicate the things that I say with some of your own life experiences and perspectives on the conversation. Thinking about belonging as a response or as an experience that someone has, for me, I'm thinking about what kind of things trigger the idea or the feeling of, wow, I really belong here. There's something special, to Margaret's point, about feeling like I can bring, I don't know, maybe not my whole authentic self. You probably don't want my whole authentic self, but the amount that I want to bring into a space where I feel like, hey, my guard is down. I'm not tone policing myself. I'm not double checking. Should I really say this to that person? Does this person really want me to ask that question? Is there going to be a repercussion following this? Am I going to, hear about this later in some kind of way, shape, or form? For me, I think that's a lot of answering those questions are a lot of the things that trigger a sense of belonging or not, depending on how we answer those questions. So I'm often thinking about, what is it that people need from me as a facilitator in creating space for this kind of dialogue to feel seen? What does it mean when people feel invisible, and how can we see them and help them feel seen? What does it mean for someone to feel heard, right? So often we ask questions at people instead of people. We say things to them and then bring our intonation up and put a question mark at the end of our sentence and pretend it was a question, but we were just telling them something. And so what does it mean to really hear someone and become a master question asker and allow them to peel back the layers of themselves or their experiences that they want to? So those are just some of the things that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about coming into a space with a team or doing the work that I do. What does seeing and hearing need to look like in this space so that people can settle in and feel like this is a space that they co-own with me, and then they get to participate differently thereafter. So
awesome. Thank you, Daniel. And next, we're going to have the question for Dr. Tina. I'm going to call you. First of all, I love your title, Chief of Strategy and Belonging. And with that said, how do you all infuse with your long-term strategy belonging? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Thank you. Great question. And so much like Daniel, I just want to extend and start off by thanking you all for being here today to engage and learn more about this very important work. As we think about Columbus and our metropolitan area growing and thriving, we are getting a number of individuals that are coming in that represent different communities, that have different personal and social identities. And so the more that we can lean into belonging, because it is that bridge between diversity and really ensuring that people are valued, seen, and heard, the more that our region, that our city will thrive. And so thank you all again for coming and engaging in this conversation. And so at the Ohio State University Alumni Association, we see belonging as not just a strategy, but it is really the core of what we do. And so in that essence, it's important for us to, one, make sure that we are keeping a firm eye on our data, that we understand what identities, what communities are being represented. This helps us also understand those identities and communities that are not being represented, those historically excluded communities. And so that gives us the sense of urgency that we need to act. And at the core of our actions is our university's shared values: diversity and innovation, excellence and impact, care and compassion, integrity, and respect. And so as we move forward to create cultures where there's belonging, we make sure that those shared values are at the foundation of the action and the work that we do to ensure, again, that everybody is seen, heard, and valued, that their participation and inclusion is not judged, that there's no judgment on if I use this word or if I say this statement or if I wear this particular piece of garment, that I'm going to be judged for that. And so that's how we approach our work at the Alumni Association.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tina. Okay, Jennifer, we're going to come to you next and focus a little bit on retention and belonging. So as we all know, retention is critical in this labor market, right? And especially with the whole return to work and, you know, and not being able to work in your jammies anymore. So can you talk a little bit about the challenge and how you and your team are addressing it?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me, and thank you for braving the cold. The first day of real winter here. We know it's not the last, but I'm glad to see so many familiar faces, but a lot of new ones as well. So absolutely, you know, retention is everything. At the Ohio Veterans, I know the department that I work for, the Ohio Veterans Department, we also run 2 long-term care facilities in the state for veterans. And so that means we hire nurses. And as everyone in this room knows, even if you don't work in healthcare, it has been a national shortage of nurses before COVID, but certainly afterwards, it has just been, to say it's the challenge is not enough. So something that we continue to work on. Retention has to be ongoing, and so does belonging, because the people change, the jobs change, what's happening today changes frequently. So it has to be ongoing. We have to remind ourselves over and over that what is it, I very much not necessarily asking the question when you know the answer. Ask the question so people have the opportunity to really tell you their feedback. It's so important to hear that directly from the staff. We have people who have left our organization to come back. What a great thing. And I'm like, that's fantastic. So why did you decide to come back? There's 100 reasons, but it's great to hear the parts about the organization that pulled them back. The parts about how we honor our veterans every day to pull them back. With veteran staff, we have a good amount of veteran employees and active military employees as well. So for them to feel belonging, we want to hear their voices as well. We are caring for veterans every single day across the state in a myriad of programs and whatnot, but we also want them to tell us how it is to work here. I am not a veteran myself, so I know that that means, like so many other categories I might not fit in, I have to listen. And I'm happy to listen. And they will tell you if you listen. And we also make sure for as far as the military programs, that they're just aware that we already know this stuff. I'm human resources, we got you. You know, you gotta go on deployment, we're here. You wanna talk about medical leave, we got you. It's just making sure that everybody, but because we have that significant military component, really knows that we know their language. Probably not exactly what they're going through, but we know the terms, we know the needs, and we're always here for you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, so Daniel, indulge me as I go off script, so this is not in your notes, but I feel a need to push back on you a little bit when you said, oh, I can't bring all of my authentic self to work, right? And so would you be willing to share with us why you feel that way?
Sure.
Curse me later. Oh, I shouldn't say that.
No. I'll curse you now if you want my whole authentic self. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that I would say necessarily, I guess depending on different organizations and teams I've been a part of, there have been parts of my experience that feel like this is not a necessary component for me to share, or there's not enough time for me to unfold my entire life experiences, or this person has not exchanged enough currency of trust with me to have earned the right to know this about my experience, if it's a part of my life in which I've suffered or grieved or something. And so I'm sure many of us have parts of our lives where maybe we're not thinking no one will ever hear this, but as we move through our workspace, there are certain people who maybe we feel have earned the right to kind of look behind the curtain a little bit. So I think my hesitation in saying it's not necessarily about bringing your full self to work is I think that sometimes that can feel like a mandatory part of the belonging conversation, that you must not feel like you belong if you're not bringing your whole self to work. And it can become a little bit like an obligation to share more of yourself than maybe you want to. And I know for many people who have felt muted in some kinds of ways or marginalized in some kind of ways, there are ways that they show up to work with self-preservation of one of their priorities. And so I think me saying that, I'm trying to honor the fact that not everyone has had smooth sailing relationally in every place of work that or every team that they've been on. And so we can do the work of belonging without forcing a level of oversharing or hyper-connectivity that makes someone feel that they've put themselves in a place they don't want to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I lead into that,
Go right
Daniel?
ahead.
So
I wish you
I
would.
agree with you 100%. As a member of several historically excluded communities, we have to make sure in terms of that trust that we have for our colleagues that we're working with, but also that it's a psychologically safe space for us to be our authentic self. Oftentimes, when you are entering a culture or entering a different workplace, you have to understand that culture of the workplace, and it is getting a genuine feeling of if those identities that people might not know of you will be appreciated, right? And a lot of times that might not be the case. You do have to make a calculated decision in terms of how much of yourself you will share. And so oftentimes I think entering into those spaces knowing that my personal journey does not always have to be for public consumption. I determine when and how I share the personal journey that I've gone through, the personal identities that I embrace. You can look at me outwardly and see my social identities, that I'm Black, that I'm female, but on a personal level, you can't see that I'm a working class, come from a working class family, that we had poverty issues and issues around housing affordability and those types of things. So it is a matter of determining when that space is safe enough to share those aspects.
Thank you for that, Dr. Tina. Did you want to add, Jennifer?
Well, of course. You know, it actually, hearing the two of you speak, it made me think of something that I tell new supervisors. And it's going to start weird, so bear with me. I tell new supervisors, especially if they were a colleague and now they're going to be the boss, that it's great to be friendly, that you should be friendly, share the parts of yourself that you are willing to do, but you should not cross that lines of being friends. And I know immediately as soon as I say that, people are going to be like, she does not know. But the reason I say that is because there is a difference when you're in leadership and you are responsible for a team of people. I have an amazing team of people. I do like to hear about their families and their kids and their dogs, and I want to see pictures of all of them. And that's quite sincere, and they're going to see mine too. So some nodding over that direction. But there is a line. At some point, as a leader, you might have to say no. At some point, as a leader, you might have to have a difficult conversation. And you can absolutely belong. I feel like I belong in my team, but I still feel that little bit of reservation about some things, only because I know that I have a different role.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, next question. We'll come back to you, Daniel. When you think about belonging, that word, right, and you think about inclusion, how would you describe the difference between belonging over inclusion? Or do you think they're both the same?
Yeah, great question. Again, maybe we're playing semantics, so if you've got ways of thinking about that work for you, stick with them. I tend to think about inclusion as the effort, thinking, and strategy that I'm building into a space or a team or a policy or whatever it is that I'm working on. What is my intention and my strategy to work out that intention in real life? I want to include the voices of all of my team as we have this meeting. Okay, so how am I going to have this meeting? I know some of my team are real external processors, and if I ask them, hey, in 60 seconds, give me your best idea, that's going to be a very equal meeting. Everybody has fair treatment. Everybody gets 1 minute to say their best idea, but it's not equitable, maybe because some of my team are internal processors, and they need more than 60 seconds to come up with their best idea. And so the strategy of inclusion is designing a space or meeting or relationship or conversation or policy that, from my perspective at least, allows my team to show up in their strengths, to be seen, be heard, be trusted, be respected, be believed. Belonging is the response, hopefully, that they experience because they are included. It's not always a one-for-one ratio. Maybe I'm designing a strategy or trying to do something, and as a full-time facilitator in this work, there have been many times where I've gone into a space with great intent, maybe, and the impact didn't land. And I could look at it and say, well, I tried to be inclusive, and someone else can respond, but I sure didn't feel like I belonged, right? You counted me out from the get-go. And so knowing that there's that interplay or that exchange allows me to know, or maybe to keep in mind the disparity between intent and impact all the time. I can try to be inclusive, but I can't mandate belonging. I can't tell someone when they feel safe. I can't tell someone when they feel like they've sunk in, that they want to reveal new parts of their story or other things that we've talked about here. So I think maybe the inclusion is the give and the belonging is the get, or something like that.
All right, awesome. Dr. Tina, how about you?
So I'll just extend by saying I think one of the caveats when we think about inclusion has to deal with power, right? And so how we shift power dynamics. So when we think about when we start with diversity, understanding the representation of different communities that are at the table. We include them at the table through inclusion, but it shouldn't just be including them at the table, but it should be shifting power, understanding the assets that they bring to the table, right? And that will help to ensure that you're hearing, you're seeing, and you're validating their experiences. You're understanding that they're coming to the table with something to give, something that they are uniquely positioned to contribute to the organization. And so I think in that respect, and a lot of what Daniel said earlier, that gets you to this belonging space, because once you begin to shift the power and people understand that you see me, you understand my struggle, and we are in this together, that I won't be co-opted in this opportunity, but I will come from a position of power. I think that's important. And so what we do at the Alumni Association is we work very intentionally with co-creating on an internal and external level. So internally, our teams are collaborating with one another to think about how we can sustain the engagement of all of our communities. And so through those events that we create, through the programs, and all the way down to the emails and social media posts that you all will see, our team is being very intentional in thinking about how can we engage not just our alumni, but also our supporters. And we take it a step further by then working with our clubs and societies to say, how can we create events all throughout the world, programs all throughout the Buckeye Nation and community, in which our diverse community members can come and be engaged, that they can come and be heard, that they can come and be seen. And that work takes a lot of effort on both the internal and external part. And again, that goes back to that power, right? Our external alumni and supporters need to understand that they're valued, that they have power in the work that we're doing. And so, again, our team is very intentional with creating those opportunities for engagement and co-creation.
Okay. Jennifer?
Now, how am I supposed to follow that? I will say, and it is hard to follow what was just said, because it was amazing, and I'm glad that this is being recorded, because I'm going to listen to it again. Understanding the internal parts and the social parts. So in a workplace, you have different departments. And sometimes the departments, not just the people within them, but sometimes the departments themselves have power because of who they are or what role they play. And then there's the people specifically inside those departments. So it's complicated, but it's definitely worth it, and it's something that we'll continue to work on as we go through the different projects and programs and, home operations and everything else that we offer, yes, we have to hear from leadership. Sorry. But we also have to hear from the maintenance department and the people within the maintenance department. And we have to hear from the nursing department, and we have to hear from the construction crews. And, it's really just making sure that all the layers are recognized. Because I don't know if all of the departments that don't get the FaceTime or that don't work directly, hand in hand in front of the camera, in front of the TV or whatnot all the time, get the same attention or even feeling of power and authority as some of the others. So it's making sure that all of those layers are considered and making sure that they all get an opportunity to show themselves and really be themselves.
Okay. Thank you all. You want to follow up, Daniel?
If I could,
You sure can.
I just think it was such a powerful addition to bring the word power in. For me, I have encountered often, and maybe you have too, that when we start talking about inclusion and belonging, there is often some baggage in, the pop culture, leadership development space or whatever, that what we're talking about is like a kumbaya, warm, fuzzy, everyone hold hands, and you're all magical unicorn rainbow Skittles. Isn't this wonderful? And well, I'm in operations, and I don't care about that stuff. We get things done around here. I don't need that because my team knows how to do their jobs or something. And so, understanding how the power dynamic plays out moves a conversation of inclusion and belonging from "don't you all just want to hold hands and be nice" to a conversation of operational excellence. How do we raise the bar? How do we bring our powerful selves and we look at our team and say, what are your strengths and where are we missing them? What are we not leveraging that's already in the room? Oh, we've done a great job with diversity. We got all kinds of people in the room, and then we fail to leverage the skills, talents, expertise, and experiences they bring in. And so, yeah, thinking about the word power, I think, can be scary for folks because now we're talking about systems. Now we're talking about histories. Now we're talking about things at the institutional level. But belonging isn't about being nice, right? It's about creating spaces where people get to bring their the fullest and best version of themselves that they want to into the space. That's an everybody wins situation, but it does require us to examine the paradigms of power that we have going on.
Okay. So my next question is going to be, and anyone can jump in and answer it, has there ever been a time in your career where you felt like you didn't belong? And then how did you handle that and respond?
So I'll say it's been a long time, gratefully, thankfully. When I first started working in the nonprofit sector, before I was in the government sector, everybody there, the charity nonprofit world, which is an awesome place to work in a lot of ways, but they all already know each other. They all already know that this is the plan and this is how we do it. And I think being a new leader in that space, I didn't necessarily feel like I belonged, at least for quite a while, because it took time to be able to have that conversation. They weren't the most, and I don't think this was intentional, but I will say they weren't the most free with the information. Like, oh, well, you need to know this about that board member. You should know about why we handle X, Y, Z in that particular way. And, oh, by the way, nonprofit accounting is totally different than corporate accounting, which is totally different than government accounting. And, just things like that. So it was more on me, just because of that space, to figure it out on my own. But therefore, I did feel out of the picture and like I didn't belong because I couldn't talk and walk like everybody else at that point walking in. It took quite some time.
Thank you. Anyone else like to share?
That's a deep
I know.
question, right?
I'm sorry.
So, I could just start off and say, as a Black woman that comes from a working class family whose grandparents come from coal mines of West Virginia and sharecropping fields of North and South Carolina. I was born into a place where I was historically excluded from the start, right? It was never meant to be a space for me to belong. And so what I will say is that in the spaces that I have entered into, there have been people who have created, I think, the safety for me to feel like I belonged. And the way they created that safety was very basic, asking me, what did I need to feel like I belonged? Asking me questions about who I was, learning about me as an individual, learning about my culture, learning about how and why I enter into a room, the way that I enter into a room. And so when I have been around leaders who do that, I thrive and I flourish because that is the point at which I belong. And so I think we, again, have been very intentional in our organization in asking our internal team members, what do you need to feel that you actually belong? What can we do to show that we value you and what you bring to the table? And not surprisingly, our team members have said, we want to be recognized. We want our work to be seen. And so we just don't do that one time. We do our shout outs at all the team meetings, acknowledging our team members who have gone above and beyond, not acknowledging our team members who have just got through the quarter, because sometimes it's difficult just to get through the quarter to do your regular job with life. And so we acknowledge that. And so I think listening, one, providing people with the opportunity to say what they need to feel that they belong, listening to that, as you said earlier, Jennifer, but also taking sustained and long-term action to commit to making sure that people belong is important. And so I think as we look to the younger generations in our community and in our world that are going to challenge us to have those authentic spaces of belonging, that we need to, as the older generations that are setting the foundation, be prepared to ask them that question. What do you need to feel that you belong? What do you need to feel that you are valued? And we need to be committed to providing that.
Thank you for that.
You know, I think feeling discomfort without shutting down is a learned skill, right? And some of us have a lot of practice, probably, navigating professional spaces, feeling discomfort and uncomfortable and having to engage nonetheless. And many of us, and I don't want to be over-categorical, and so paint yourself out of my example if you want to, that's no problem. But for me, I haven't had to have had a lot of practice feeling discomfort from an identity perspective, at least, navigating professional spaces. I'm a straight white, average height, Midwest, neutral accent, sport coat wearing, sneaker guy. I move in and out of professional spaces as the expected reality. I've never walked into a boardroom to work with a board or work with an executive team and somebody says, whoa, a white guy in the boardroom? What are you doing here? Everyone else in the boardroom is a white guy. And so I think for a lot of folks who look like me, there is often an absence of practice in feeling discomfort. And so when we have conversations about inclusion and belonging, we sometimes don't have a lot of anchor points. Other folks in the conversation have, unfortunately, rich histories of understanding how to navigate when the experience of belonging isn't landing, when they are purposely excluded, muted, or marginalized. And so I think my encouragement has been the way that I've tried to live, and what I often encourage leaders I work with who come from similar backgrounds that I do is expand the spaces that you navigate that make you feel a little bit out of place. Get some practice. My wife and I lived in Thailand for a couple of years a while ago now, and we were driving in a car with a dear friend, Thai woman, and we had lived there long enough. We'd studied Thai, had worked really hard to speak the language. We were working on a local project there, and we were driving along. We loved this woman. She loved us. She gets a phone call on her cell phone. She picks up the phone and answers it, and we can hear the person in Thai speaking on the other end saying, hey, where are you? What are you doing? And I don't think any ill intent from her perspective at all. But in the moment where she needed to sort of draw a line in the sand and say, I need you to know exactly who I'm talking about, and here's the shortest shorthand I've got, she said in Thai, I'm with the foreigners. And we had known her for, a decade or something, moved to work with her, worked full-time with her. She was my wife's best friend at the time. And in the moment where she needed that person to know who we were, she said, Gat Falang. And my wife and I sitting in the car were like, oh, so are we in or out? Are we your friends or are we the foreigners? And for her, I think it was a vocabulary choice about, haste and just, you know who I mean, right? But for us, it was a moment of like, oh, wow, that line in the sand hurt because we found ourselves on the side of it that we didn't think we were. And so having moments, you don't have to move to it, go drive down Morse Road and meet people, and you will engage with people who come from a different set of beliefs or practices or worldviews or socioeconomic class or something. Practice the skill of being uncomfortable, and don't allow your brain to tell you that discomfort equals danger, right? Lean into some of those spaces of discomfort. So I know everyone has probably felt like they haven't belonged at some point, but I think some of us have an absence of those experiences. And we need to practice a little bit so that we can engage in the conversation more holistically.
Okay, awesome.
I appreciate you bringing up the politics of appearance. And so for a second, if we could just park there. As we think about, again, Ohio growing and becoming even more diverse, and our Somali communities, our Nepali communities, our young people, and my daughter is here with me, so she'll tell you probably my authentic self is to wear sneakers. I am a sneakerhead. I would prefer to have on a pair of Jordans right now with this suit. But the politics of appearance would say you can't show up with the sneakers. Daniel, even though you feel comfortable in your sneakers, I knew I better not show up in some sneakers because then I will be questioned, even though I have the credential of a doctorate, even though I'm dedicated and committed to the community work and the DEIB work that I have been doing and have degrees for it. If I walked in here with a certain attire, all of that would be questioned. And so what I appreciate about our community is that we understand that politics of appearance. And so we have great nonprofits, Dress for Success. I'm always telling our students you can go there and get the outfits that you need for your interview, the outfits that you need for that week. We have great mentors in this community that are taking our people, our young people aside and saying, okay, that first couple of months, I need you to wear this, I need you to do that, this, because the politics of appearance is important. But that also plays into that belonging aspect. So as leaders, I think we need to recognize that and understand that even the mere act of coming to work and showing up, one could be discomforted because they're wearing something that is not authentically who they are. They might want to wear colors, they might want to wear bold patterns, but because of the culture of the organization, they might not be able to. Now, what I will say is that at my organization, I am very much appreciated for wearing the tennis shoes. My colleague Rob will all the time say, Tina has on the fresh kicks today, and I'll look at his kicks, and so we appreciate that about one another. So as much as we can create those spaces for people that they can walk in wearing authentically what is natural to them, let's create those spaces.
Thank you for that. So now we have time for one more question for the panelists. And that last question, Doug and I at the speaker tables were talking about the companies that's rolling back on DEI, cultural belonging, all of those things, right? And so at your respective organization, can you share a little bit about your journey as it relates to the headwinds that we are reading about? So the latest big company, which totally stunned me, but I'm going to say the company's name anyway, was Walmart rolling back their DEI efforts, right? And there's others. So can you talk a little bit in this final question about how you all are responding to the resistance?
So something that occurred, and it's been odd, and this is about the state, and I love working at the state, but I will say that our Office of Diversity and Inclusion at the state level changed its name to the Office of Accessibility and Opportunities. And that's not bad terms. There's no bad terms in that. but it was a little surprising for me, I guess. I've been so proud to be able to be part of DEI conversations and go to trainings and listen to amazing speakers and, and see some headway and, be happy that I'm standing out when I say things that might make people slightly uncomfortable, but it's the right thing to do in that room. But that change didn't change our office. I will say my director's an amazing person. I'm not saying that because she's watching. But she said, we're not going to call it that. Nobody knows what that means. They do now, but in the beginning, nobody knows what that means. We've been talking about diversity and inclusion. We've been talking about implicit bias. We've been talking about civility. We're not going to change our strategies. We're not going to change our plan. We're still going to use those terms because that's what our staff recognize, and that's what's important for us to continue to pull back. So although the state agency that changed their name is still doing what I consider to be DEIB work, they're just calling it something different. We chose not to. We chose to make sure that everybody doesn't feel like that suddenly changes how we see them or how we want to appreciate them and include them. We wanted to make sure that rather than doing a full rebranding, across 800 people, that you're still safe here. You're still comfortable here. You're still with us. We're still talking this language.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer.
As I started off earlier, I shared some of our university shared values. Again, diversity and innovation, inclusion and equity. So the Ohio State University is still very much committed to DEIB. At the Ohio State University Alumni Association, our president, Molly Rance Calhoun, is still committed to this work very much so. So she holds us accountable. Our team has metrics and strategies that we are implementing to ensure that we are engaging a diversity of our community and the great mission and vision of our organization and university. We have our Time and Change campaign that is currently going on. And so just like you all put up the QR code here for CMC, I encourage you to go to our website and donate to one of the many scholarships that we have at Ohio State that ensures that we have access for a diversity of students to come to our institution and to learn, because we know that through learning, through creating community and networking, that we can change the world. When the world calls, Buckeyes answer. And so we're going to continue to lean into that great work with our strategies and making sure that it's not one-off, that this is work that we're committed to. We know that it's hard work. We know that it's going to take a journey, and we're committed to do that.
Thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, so in my work, I work with organizations, companies, nonprofits, executive teams, et cetera, in the organizational culture, professional development, DEIB space. I feel like I've got some flexibility in my kind of vocal range, I guess, to call the work what it needs to be called in the spaces so that, well, Chris and I were talking about this at the beginning, how do we create the widest front door possible for the work that we want to do? And if I'm going to be serious, and this was some wrestling I did years and years ago, but if I'm going to be serious about doing the work of inclusion, does that mean I'm going to include everybody in it? Because there's a lot of work in the DEI space that feels like it's preaching to the choir. We have an event, and there's a DEI title to the event in Central Ohio or much of Ohio. I could probably tell you 75% of who's going to be there. And it's the people who came last time and last time and last time and last time. And so how do we continue to create a wider front door? And we've seen organizations doing this by sometimes changing the name of the work. Oh, it's not DEIB, it's accessibility and opportunity. We find that more people connect. A lot of times, I call the work that I do culture work, right? Culture is how we be and do team. Diversity is a part of that. Inclusion is a part of that. Equity is a part of that. Belonging is a part of that. Collaboration is a part of that. Innovation is a part of that. Conflict engagement is a part of that. Vision and alignment is a part. I mean, we can create a really wide front door. And so I think while there is clearly political motivation at levels that I probably have not earned the right to navigate or maybe don't want to, people are making political postures and plays in terms of whether they quote unquote support the work of DEI or not. But I have never been in a room of people who lead other people and not found resonance in all of the ways that I just talked about what it means to be in Do Team. The work of diversity, equity, and inclusion is so obvious and necessary to those who actually work with other people day in and day out. And so I'm in a little bit of a unique position that I don't mind so much what we call it, and I know that won't be everyone's position, and I respect that. But for me, it's about creating a front door that feels welcoming to people who have not maybe feel welcomed into the DEI conversation before, and including them in what are we trying to do here and why does it matter so much.
Thank you all for that. So now we're going to get to the portion of the conversation where we want to hear from the audience and those folks on live stream. So for this portion, I'm going to turn it over to you, Doug.
Margaret, thank you very much, and thank you to today's panelists. Great conversation. Another hard conversation to have at CMC. We do that quite often, and those are often our best ones too. So if you have a question for our panelists today, please do join me here at the microphone. If you're watching on the live stream, if you're watching on YouTube, please type your question into the chat. Your question will come to me on my phone. Great questions at CMC. We always review these guidelines. Great questions at CMC always have two things in common. They take less than 30 seconds to ask, and what punctuation mark does a question end with? It ends with a question mark. Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to launch us off with this first one here. Margaret, you mentioned that DEI initiatives in parts of corporate America seem to be in retreat. The question is, why do you all think this is happening? And what will the cost be to the American workforce of today and the American workforce of the future?
Panelists?
Great question. Any other questions? Anybody have any other?
Well, I'll jump in
Please
quickly
do.
and say that I think it's happening because people are just uncomfortable, right? I don't think that DEI has really ever been a comfortable conversation. And one of the things that we talk about at ADS and CODC is getting comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And that just starts with the conversation. And so I think, when we think about, what's in it for everyone, right? Because often what I hear people say is, oh, DEI is about other people, right? The minority people and bringing them along. But really it is, and that's when we talk about belonging as well. It's about everyone. And I think it's so important to have those conversations of how everyone is a piece of the culture and that allyship is very important. So, it's happening, but I think that we have to stay courageous and stay after the journey that we're on.
To that very briefly, I think the importance of everyone being seen in the space of DEIB is important because, Daniel, even though you sit here and you say you are the straight white male from Midwest, there is a component of your lived experience where you're not always in that position of privilege. There's somewhere before you got married, if you're in a community where marriage is valued, before you got married, you were devalued, right? Because you weren't married. And so I think humanizing that component of DEIB so everybody sees and understands there's a space where we're not all in privilege. There's a space, my grandmother used to say, just because you see I have gray hair doesn't mean that I'm deaf and can't hear you. You don't have to yell at me because I have gray hair, right? And so ageism starts to play into that. So when we think about neurodiversity, how autism and all these things are growing and expanding in our community, everyone has an aspect of their identity that is devalued based upon power and privilege in our world, in our community. And so it's allowing people to tap into that so they can show the empathy that they need to give not just to their fellow person, but also to themselves to say, hey, I'm not always in this position of privilege and power.
I want to add just 2 seconds really quick. As far as the part of the question that addressed kind of like future generations, I'm excited. Honestly, the next generations that I've had the opportunity to work with, I'm Gen X, what are we known for, being apathetic? Oops. Not all of us are good at that, but the next generations, they have ideas. They have ideas. They were brought up in areas that were more diverse. They were taught in classrooms that were more diverse and inclusive. And they have a lot of great ideas. So honestly, although we may be working through the change that's happening now, I am incredibly excited for those next years to come.
Good afternoon. I was thinking what time it was. This is a great conversation. My name is Juday Engel, and I have a variety of things that I do, and one of them, I have positions in DEI. So thank you for this conversation. There's a couple things that the last comments that the two of you made actually is making me change my question, which is still going to be under 30 seconds, Doug. Okay, yeah. So I think about neurodiversity, and been listening to a lot of things in the UK. They seem to be, no offense to US, they seem to be like either publicizing or well ahead of some of us, which I think is great. I think about neurodiversity with the autism and the ADHD and the dyslexia, and then I'm also thinking about perimenopause, menopause for some of us, and wondered about that piece. If you have heard research, or if you have heard about people, especially that last part, how companies are kind of setting things up so that people can talk to them. And I think about the other thing, and I'm sorry, Doug, universal design, and thinking about ways to create spaces so that we don't have to go and say, you know, if we're having a hot flash, or if we need a little bit more time to complete something, so we don't have to tell people things unless we feel like it's a safe space, Daniel, to your point earlier. So were those question marks?
No, I think that's a great question. And so what I can say at our organization, again, the Alumni Association, we're very intentional about, having the conversation around neurodiversity, around differences that individuals have and express when they enter into the workplace. And so as we think about that professional development that we offer, from the DISH training to the CLIF strengths, you know, we are mindful to go back and say, how are we ensuring that this training is resonating with individuals that have neurodiversity, that we are acknowledging their unique positioning and preparing their colleagues to be able to collaborate and work with them, again, in a way where they won't be excluded, where they will not be judged, but they will be valued and appreciated for the uniqueness that they bring to the table. Great question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kay Wilson. I'm here today with Mahogany Media. My question is, you mentioned sometimes the uncomfortability that people have in talking about DEI and how they feel excluded. So what are some ways that you are creating or allowing space for people to talk about that uncomfort to move them to feeling belonging?
You know, I think one of the things we need to do is just talk about the discomfort itself, right? To kind of open the box a little bit of what is uncomfortable here. I think sometimes we talk about how uncomfortable DEI is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and there are perceptions of discomfort. There are perceptions of reverse racism. There are perceptions of this isn't about me. There are perceptions, and sometimes maybe we need to peel some layers back and ask what's really happening. I think what has been constructive for a lot of teams I've worked with is, and you only have to go as deep into the science as you want to, but thinking about the brain response to discomfort, right? Number one, that's the only place in our brain where learning happens. You don't learn anything until your brain feels uncomfortable enough to adopt or connect new information. Otherwise, it just goes happily along its way, telling itself, I know what I know, what I know, what I know, what I know, until you trigger discomfort. So you feel uncomfortable? Wonderful. We've just entered an opportunity for an aha moment. That's great. And we can talk a little bit about why our brain interprets discomfort as danger. It's doing it to try to help you, right? Maybe you're not a bad guy because you feel uncomfortable. I work a lot with teams to unmoralize their conversations of culture. Culture isn't a moral position. It's the environment that we create through behaviors together. And so let's move away from a moral or ethical, oh, as soon as you feel uncomfortable, it must be because you're a secret racist, huh? Found you. I don't know. I'm not sure that's my job. My job is to invite that person to the edges of their discomfort and explore why is that discomfort sparking right there, and how do we unfold it a little bit? What is the learning that is under that rock of discomfort? And so, I don't know, starting with the discomfort itself, but I'll be quiet.
I would just say that on our end, we start with data, right? And so from an internal perspective, we want to start with how are our team members feeling? Are they feeling that they belong? From an external perspective, we want to understand how our alumni and supporters feel. Do they feel like they're belonging? So we gain an understanding of that data through surveys, through focus groups, but we act on that data by learning the stories of individuals that are there, sharing those stories, because when we can share a story of an alumni from a historically excluded community that has had a great opportunity because of what Ohio State was able to provide for them from an education perspective, from a networking and community perspective, that opens up the conversation. And the focus isn't solely on their diversity, but the focus is on the opportunity that was created. The focus is on the benefit of what DEIB brought us, a great individual that had a great experience at our university or our association. And so again, I think leaning into those stories and providing the safe space for individuals to be courageous, to share their story, helps to advance the conversation. And so again, we start with the data and, you know, we end with the story.
Jennifer, because I'm getting, he turned my mic off. Okay. 30 seconds because I'm getting the wrap it up. Okay.
I just want to add, and you just said it, it's the safe space. Part of belonging is knowing that if you have an idea and it's not taken, it's okay. Or that if you have, you know, a suggestion and not everybody loves it, that's okay. You can have that risk. So having the psychological safety in place is part of that design so that you can be uncomfortable, but you also know you're still safe, that no one's going to judge you for it, no one's going to hold this against you in the future, that this is still, it's good for you to say it, even if people don't agree.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Now I'm going to turn it back over to the good Doug over here.
Shot across the bow. All right. And I do want to acknowledge that I am wearing tennis shoes as well today, but it's just because my feet hurt. There's no political thing, but I'm glad that it's a comfortable space for it. I want to thank the sponsor of today's forum, Advanced Drainage Systems, right here. Let's give them a round of applause. We also want to acknowledge today's forum partners, Aspire and the Central Ohio Workforce Development Network, and we are grateful to the presenting sponsors of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. And a very special appreciation for today's speakers, Daniel Juday, Tina Pierce, Jennifer Robinson, and our host, Margaret Finley. Let's have another hand for them. Please make plans now to join us right here at the Ellis next Wednesday for our last forum of the year, Vacant to Vibrant, the Future of Retail in Downtown Columbus. Thank you, everyone. We couldn't do this without you. Have a great week. Thank you.